Director of Events for the National Indian Gaming Association. Thank you so much for joining us today for our exciting and informative webcast series, Tribal Gaming and the New Normal, with hosts Victor Rocha and Jason Giles. Today's discussion will focus on fine dining and restaurants. Before we introduce the presenters, I would like to go over some housekeeping items to keep in mind. All audience members are on listen-only mode, which means you are muted. We will be monitoring audience engagement on the dashboard and do encourage you to participate by using the question panel. There will be time for questions at the end of the presentation. We are recording this webinar and you will receive an email with a copy of the recording so that you may listen to and refer back to at any time. This webinar, as well as others in our series, will also be made available on our website, indiangamingtradeshow.com, under the Education tab in the coming week. Without further delay, let me introduce Victor, Conference Chairman with the National Indian Gaming Association and editor of Pachanga.net. Victor, take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Victor Rocha. My co-host is Jason Giles, Executive Director of the National Gaming Association, and this is a new normal. In today's conversation, we're talking to our friends, renowned restaurant consultant and entrepreneur Elizabeth Blau, and Carl Winston, Director of the L. Robert Payne School of Hospitality and Tourism Management at San Diego State University, about the return of fine dining and restaurants to not only tribal gaming, but to North America. But before we get into today's conversation, let me give you some context. Now, anyone following this story on restaurants and pandemics knows this is probably one of the most compelling narratives going on right now. I got in touch with the National Restaurant Association and I asked them about what's going on in the industry, and they gave me some numbers to share with you. They said, according to a recent survey, the food service industry lost about $165 billion in revenue from March through July and is on track to lose $240 billion this year. In a May survey, 75% of restaurant operators say it's unlikely the restaurants will be profitable within the next 6 months. And remember, that was in May, so there's been a lot of changes. According to the pandemic shutdown, more than 8 million, during the height of the pandemic shutdown, more than 8 million restaurant employees had been laid off or furloughed. But according to the BLS job report figures in March, April, eating and drinking places lost more than 6 million employees. In both May and June, 1.5 million jobs returned. And in July, another 500,000, but the industry is still down about $2.5 million jobs. So as you can see, this is an industry under stress. This is an industry in duress. But as someone who works in this industry, I think this is one of the most compelling narratives. But first, before we go into this, I'd like to welcome my guests, Carl and Elizabeth. Elizabeth, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So, Carl, let me start with you. Tell me, first of all, tell me about yourself and your background for our readers.
Sure.
Listeners, sorry.
Sure. I'm a reformed restaurateur and hotelier who 20 years ago went into higher ed and created a hospitality school with a bachelor's and master's degree in hotel, restaurant, and event management. And I live in sunny San Diego. You can see behind me, we actually had a cloud in the sky today. So that's big news for us. Anyway, it's great to be here. I stay very involved in the industry and have been a multi-unit operator in this space for several decades, sadly, and still deeply involved in it, just on the educational side now.
Wow. And Elizabeth, welcome.
Thank you.
Why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Well, I'm a Connecticut native, but I've been in Las Vegas for over 22 years. My heart is in restaurant operations. We have 3 restaurants here in Las Vegas, 5 in Vancouver, Canada, and 1 in Pennsylvania. We're partners with Buddy Velastro, the Cake Boss, and 2 of our operations. And then we run an international hospitality consulting and development firm. And we have projects as far-flung as Saudi Arabia, done work all over the Middle East, Asia, Europe, but a lot here in the United States, and worked quite extensively in tribal gaming.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I was talking to the head of our F&B last night, and he was I was telling him that you were going to be on the on the program. So I know he was. He told me to say hi, and he highly recommended you also. So tell us a little bit about what's going on in the pandemic, Carl. How do you see this industry? Some of those numbers that I just gave are just very jarring. We're talking millions and millions of jobs and billions of dollars. And how has the pandemic been? How do you see this issue?
I think a couple of things are clear to me. I think if we sort of think about what happened 6 years, oh wait, it was 6 months ago, it just felt like 6 years ago back in March. Restaurateurs, tribes with casinos, and I should have mentioned we have the only degree in tribal gaming at San Diego State, so should have done that plug earlier. But what we're hearing in Indian country, we're hearing from restaurateurs is we kind of gutted our way through the first few months with savings, with paycheck protection plan money. And we're kind of alive now because the weather's good, because we can do outdoor dining. The authorities haven't shut us down as much as they could. We're actually getting outside again and feeding people. Takeout's keeping us alive. But what I really fear is the winter. And I think what I see in the horizon is some real question marks in the viability of dining, period, if people can't dine outside. Here in San Diego, Southern California, no problem. If you're in Las Vegas, some months of the year are great. Other months of the year is freezing or it's too hot. I can't imagine what's going to happen in the upper Midwest and the Northeast this winter. I think it could be pretty darn bleak.
Wow. Is this the end of the restaurant industry as we know? Especially in the early 90s when the whole reality thing on television started happening, the restaurateur was part of that recipe for success, even for the Kardashians and stuff. And, they have all these chef programs, so it's really, restaurateur and being an entrepreneur. It's almost like that's the way that you start, to get in this industry and be an entrepreneur, and it offers a pathway to so many people to success and stuff like that. And that's the part that frightens me, that these opportunities are being taken away from people who are not going to have those same paths. Am I right, Elizabeth? Is this what's happening?
Without a doubt. I mean, people don't realize that the restaurant industry is really too important to fail. It's a rite of passage. Think of every teenager. It's their first job. It's their first foray into adulthood, responsibility, learning, business values, learning how to, have your first job. We're colorblind, gender blind, racial blind. I mean, we accept everyone with, welcome arms. And in, most states, it's hard enough to fill our restaurant jobs. And this is absolutely unprecedented. I mean, they're quoting, 16 million people could be out of work. And organizations like the Independent Restaurant Coalition are saying up to 85% of independent restaurants in America could see their demise. And no, I don't think this is the end of the restaurant business. I think, as I said, it's too important to fail. I mean, think of where somebody proposes, where you celebrate, some of life's most, important weddings and anniversaries and celebrations. We're nurturers by trade. We are the hospitality industry. And so what we need is our government officials to work together to figure out how to, bail out an industry that, not by its own working, has been, handicapped at almost every turn. And, we've been operating successfully at 50% capacity in Las Vegas with indoor dining, for more than 3 months now. We use, the same safety protocols that people are using outdoors. And so a lot of these states just have to look at the success stories and start moving forward. For a city like New York, not even to have a plan for indoor dining is just egregious. And and to say that that restaurants are for the middle class or the upper class, what about the 16 million people who come from every class and ethnicity, who sometimes work 2 and 3 jobs to support their families, who make the restaurants work? And so, I just, continue to give an impassioned plea for our Democrats and our Republicans to work together to protect our American jobs.
Wow. Carl, would you like to add something?
Sure. I think I love your comments, Elizabeth. I think they're spot on. And I'm extremely bullish about restaurants 2 years from now, or whatever the number of months is, because we just love to celebrate rites of passage. We love to go out. We love to socialize. That's who we are. I think what we've got is a short-term problem. And I think a lot of businesses, some tribes, are going to get really, really hurt. And whether it's government bailout or a vaccine, I don't know what it is, but the way I'm looking at this is there's a lot of short-term pain right now.
But to Carl's point of that short-term pain, many of these restaurants won't survive to the long term. And, frankly, I was at the Moronga Casino just last week, and they're able to operate their indoor restaurants. And I saw safety protocol after safety protocol, people operating, people eating safely indoors. And so, I think that, that there's some hysteria. And I think we all need to take a deep breath and analyze how to do this properly so we don't lose more jobs.
Well, I actually ate at my tribal casino on Saturday. So, I'm out there doing it. I actually had the vaccine flambe, which was actually really good. I don't know if it's the actual flambe or the actual vaccine, but I just know it was really good. Is it possible to make a sauce with the vaccine? Are we too soon? Is this too soon to be talking about this? But okay, I just checked.
Carl, this is Jason over at National Indian Gaming Association. Well, if you look at the restaurant numbers, certainly the folks that are prevalent on Uber Eats and DoorDash, the McDonald's, the fast food pizza chains, even Chipotle, their numbers have really come back strong, and they've done, obviously there's that order out aspect and having it delivered, and it's not that expensive and all of that. But to Victor's original question, and it's exactly what Elizabeth was just saying, these restaurants are not going to survive another 6 months. And so what does a casino do with a huge empty space, all these buffets? Can they wait another 6 months for a vaccine, which, you see the problems with AstraZeneca's vaccine today. They had to suspend phase 3. We've been waiting for this thing in America anyway to calm down and subside, and we never get there. So we're with a lot of people. We're just like, well, let's see what happens in a month. Let's see what happens in another month. It can't go on like this. So at some point, someone's gonna have to break some protocol here. What happens to all that space in a casino, which is what tribal casinos are really worried about right now?
Well, you made a lot of good questions in there, sir.
Do they put a McDonald's in? Do they go to more fast food stuff?
Well, I got to tell you,
in and out.
You made so many interesting questions in there. One of them was about these DoorDash and the other delivery services. Those cost the restaurateur an enormous amount of money.
Oh, really?
They are not making the same profit. They are paying a significant double-digit percentage, 20+%, to that company. They don't. Elizabeth's restaurants don't make 20%. So if she's paying 20% off the top, she's got nothing left.
Right.
So, for a McDonald's to try and do that to just keep the lights on, maybe, but I don't think it's sustainable. I think your question about the vaccine and everything, no one's answering this question. Great. We got a vaccine 6 months from now. 30% of Americans won't take it. Now what? Mm-hmm. And to your other question about what do the casinos do? It's going to vary by jurisdiction. I spent 2 weeks on the road this summer, just driving all over California and Nevada. I'm sorry I didn't visit you, Elizabeth, but I did drive through. And what I saw is every jurisdiction, every tribal casino I visited had different protocols because everybody's interpreting it differently. So I think certain tribes are going to find success repurposing their spaces because they have to. I mean, and people in Indian country are clever, and you've dodged a lot of horrible things. And I think some of them will be able to adapt. I think they're going to be the ones like Morongo, like Sequan and Verona here in San Diego, that are closer to the populations and have a better chance at it. I think the ones that are a little more remote are in deep doo-doo. And I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all question to what do you do with all that space. I just know that it's going to take clever innovations and a live event strategy where people feel safe coming to the casino again. And I don't know exactly what that's going to look like, Jason.
Okay.
You know, Elizabeth, you know, people need to eat. One of the things I've been thinking about, and you kind of brought this up, is the fact that you were at Morongo. And you mentioned that there's dining in Las Vegas. Doesn't this kind of begin the template of what is doable and what is acceptable in the restaurant, that people feel safe and stuff like that?
Absolutely, but it's to Carl's point, whether it's Indian gaming jurisdictions or just the individual states and a governor's particular political affiliation. I mean, nobody is doing anything that's centralized. As I said, we're doing it safely. It's not comfortable to sit outside in Las Vegas in this extreme heat. We're coming into our season where we actually can start dining outside, but it's a short season because we get winter in Las Vegas. And so if people could safely follow the protocols, like I saw at Morongo, like I saw this summer at Mohegan Sun in my home state of Connecticut, it's absolutely doable. And, the protocols are identical, whether you're serving outside or you're serving inside. I mean, the only difference is some air filtering. So naturally, anything outside is going to be, a marked level of increased safety, but there's no reason that can't be done inside.
It seems like the pressure that's on the entrepreneur just doesn't seem to let up on them. What is working, Elizabeth? What are you seeing with your own eyes? What's working?
Well, I mean, again, in Las Vegas, hotels and casinos like the Venetian and the Wynn have gone to extraordinary lengths to create, handbooks of safety precautions. Wynn has even shared theirs on their website so that, that any restaurateur can follow it. I spent some time in Massachusetts this summer. Again, in Cape Cod, they allowed indoor dining, and their numbers are fine. I think that where you run into issues is in some states with young people wanting to express themselves and get out in the summer and party, and but even bars can be managing things effectively. And then, like any other industry, there are those, who are taking advantage and who are not socially distancing and wearing masks. And that's where the problem. I mean, we need to attack the problems instead of just making these blanket statements that, that nobody in our industry can operate professionally, effectively, and safely. And I think that Indian gaming has done a phenomenal job of leading the way and showing that that it can be done, and it can be done safely.
Well, as Carl knows, the tribes in Southern California are starting to become more and more stringent on their requirements. They've changed the mask requirements. You can't have the valves. You can't have the bandanas. You have to have proper masks. If you don't have them, they will give them to you. So they're trying to make it as frictionless as possible. And, speaking of frictionless, what is frictionless dining going to look like? Seems to be the big operative word in the industry, frictionless. We're going to get you're going to walk in, it'll be frictionless. You're going to be able to wave, and you'll check in, you'll go to your room, and you're going to be the loneliest person in the middle of all these people. You know what I mean? It just feels that this is where what does frictionless dining look like? Is that, waiters with masks, and is that, it just doesn't, as I go out and, like I said, I went out this weekend and I actually go up probably every week. I think it's important that I go and I support the local industries and stuff like that. And we wear our masks and we soon as we get, we go to the place, stand in line, we're wearing a mask. When we sit down, we take our masks off. We eat. We don't sing or yell or cough or spit. You know what I mean? We're trying to keep as low profile, yet we're out there trying to, help the industry and stuff like that. So, it seems to be that this is where the industry is going, at least, and I think that we need to also let know that, this is short term, couple years or something like that, with our fingers crossed, But what is going to be the casino experience, Elizabeth? Is it going to be vending machines that you get to your room, or is it going to be the little robots that come up to your room with the food and you don't see people anymore? Is that where we're heading?
No, I don't think so. I think that, like anything else, a global pandemic gives us an opportunity to reinvent, and also to fix some things that may have been broken in the past. Most restaurants and casinos adhere to whatever health department and cleaning and sanitation standards to the highest level to begin with. But like anything else, when you sign a check and you use a pen, or when every server is using the same computer terminal, and there's dirty hands and fingers touching money, touching dirty plates, it's going to give us an opportunity to be a little bit more contactless, and I think that's important. And back to Jason's question about the buffets in these tremendous spaces. This isn't something for Indian gaming, even for restaurants. This is a worldwide reimagination of what a buffet is. I mean, when you go to Europe, every first-class luxury hotel has a breakfast buffet. I always hold a napkin to take my things, because gosh knows how many people have touched all of those service utensils. So this is going to give us an opportunity to rethink. So many people have closed their buffets, and rightly so, because the entire buffet experience is not geared to a pandemic. Some of those in Las Vegas have tried to reinvent. The Wicked Spoon at the Cosmopolitan already was offering things, not so much in a mass serving trough, but in individual portions. That was, kind of their thing to begin with. And so some people are trying to mimic that. The Wynn tried to modify their service and saw that was not going to be economically feasible. And it was also not necessarily what the customer wanted. So for now, they've decided to close their buffet. And so I think that is, probably one of the largest real estate spaces in every Indian gaming casino that I've been in. And I think that's going to be the challenge. So are they going to be modified to be something more like the food hall that we're seeing? I think, again, now is the time to re-examine, to reimagine. But that old buffet formula was marginally broken in the past before. That all-you-can-eat theme, while popular, maybe not the best health-wise for people. And so I'd like to believe that this is going to give us an opportunity to reimagine what buffet 2.0, what all-you-can-eat dining. But I think that we have seen a tremendous trend with the evolution from the food court to more of this very cool and often upscale food hall that really on the restaurateur side is so important too, because it's got such a lower cost than that huge barrier of entry to open a multi-million-dollar space. Now with very small square footage, you can do some very creative things. And so I think it's going to be great for those women, those minority operators, who have a singular, exciting concept, very much like what you've seen in Asia and Singapore and the hawker market. So I believe it's there's going to be some pain initially, but I think with some financial investment, this should be great for Indian gaming and for the buffet world at large.
When you say food hall, what do you mean by food hall? Are we talking, what exactly is a food hall?
So a food court is typically something that you find in a mall, in many casinos, and it's usually just major brand operators who have all set up shop. But food halls, which are proliferating all over the country, give a small operator an ability to do, a taco stand, a gelateria, featuring, ice creams, pies and cakes, singular hamburger, vegan concepts, Indian concepts, Chinese, Thai, really runs the gamut, but they're curated, and they have a really independent kind of feeling. I don't know, Carl, maybe you have a better description.
I was actually typing Victor notes like, let me talk.
I was deleting. No, Carl, you talk too much. No, just kidding. Right.
I think you're exactly right. The food hall concept is currently the rage. It's got some really interesting elements. Something that you mentioned earlier, Victor, about what's the guest want and demand. I think we got two kinds of guests going forward. Some are going to want a really safe experience and they're like paranoid, and it's like they're never going to eat in a buffet again. And others are going to throw caution to the wind and say, I want to experience something. And one of the things I love about food hall concept is, and it works really well for gaming, is it's plug and play. You can, as Elizabeth used the term, curate. It's not like you're building a permanent restaurant in a food court thing. It's a modular approach to bring your stuff in, set up. It could be a pop-up. It could last for a month. It could be, if it's fabulously successful, it could be there for a long time. What really pertains in Indian country is you can make some of this very authentic by going local and featuring local entrepreneurs or tribal entrepreneurs, even within the casino itself. And who doesn't want to eat local and experience local and experience culture when they're visiting someplace? And I think the opportunities for this plug and play, and a little corporate, a little local, a little entrepreneur, a little like we're going to help some underserved community open up a little place in our food hall, really speaks to giving the consumer what they want. And then they eat communally, and they often have an outdoor component to them as well. I think it's a really great concept for what might fit in the future of a buffetless casino.
And similar to a buffet, if I want a salad and Victor, you want a burger, and Jason wants deli, you can get each of those, food categories, and then come back and meet with your group. So it just gives a lot of variety. And so really just kind of a spin on the buffet concept.
Another thing that a lot of them do is they have a retail component, which gives another reason to visit. Which, if you're in a casino, you want frequent visits. And if there's a great bakery that pops up in the food hall, somebody might go there just to pick up some great pastry items or bread items to take home.
Farmers markets can be added. It really gives you a lot of leeway and a lot of creativity. And again, a lower cost of entry than building out, a big restaurant space.
Now, Elizabeth, this is Jason again. You mentioned earlier that you're waiting for Congress and the president to come back with another COVID relief package, and so is Indian country at large. Our tribal governments desperately need the help as well. So do state and local. But one of the key sticking points to them not reaching a deal is this waivers of liability. They want to have liability waivers for entrepreneurs, so that if you've got a back end cook that gets everyone infected and someone's eating there, they're not going to come back and sue you and say you gave me COVID, or you caused my dad's death or something like that. Frankly, I'm shocked that I haven't seen any of those lawsuits yet.
Right.
Because I'm frankly just shocked, because there have been instances where people are so convinced that this was the sole source of where they picked up the virus. But how do you see, is the restaurant industry going to need protection like that moving forward here, given what you were saying about you've been to places and folks are seemingly feeling secure enough to eat inside without masks, and how is that waiver factor into you going forward here without a vaccine, at least into next year, it looks like? How is that going to play out?
It's critical, and it's one of the most important points, Jason. We have the same issue with food poisoning. You have somebody that gets a stomach ailment and swears they got it for your restaurant, but you had 300 people that dined there and nobody else. And so, a lot of this and the contract tracing is supposed to help, but, we may never know, where somebody actually, got the disease. Some of this has to be self-policing. If somebody gets sick in my restaurant, that's the end of my restaurant. And so, it's not just about the business liability. It's about, there's got to be some self-policing here and some responsibility on business owners to, to take care of their employees. That's one of the many business issues. One of the groups that's been formed, the Business Interruption Group, is trying to file a class action lawsuit because the insurance companies are denying any of our business interruption insurance. So there are so many, the tax credits, the tip credits. There's a whole litany of business issues, in addition to this Restaurants Act, which is hopefully part of this new stimulus package. But the death toll to the restaurant industry if now we're going to be liable for contract tracing. But listen, negligence is negligence, and if you allow somebody knowingly to come to work, look at what happened in so many of those meat factories where they were running triple shifts and you were getting bonuses to come to work, despite whether you were sick, and those huge outbreaks. So, there's a difference between caution and negligence, but, we could be, absolutely underground with frivolous lawsuits if there's not some kind of protection. And you're right. I am astounded that we're not seeing more of that. Maybe the trial lawyers have found some compassion.
Yeah, it's a big issue, now it doesn't directly impact if you're a restaurateur on tribal property, on tribal land, you're part of a separate jurisdiction, but overall, that's an aspect where our organization, we've sort of just playing it down the middle on that one, but we can see where folks will need that protection. Now, let me ask you this though, when, with regards to the liability again, how are you just forestalling that, planning ahead for that? How are you just trying to make it, so that scenario doesn't necessarily happen? I mean, are there protocols that you institute that say, we did X, Y, Z, and this one slipped through the cracks, this shouldn't be the end of our business, basically?
Look, the number of people that call us for reservations and ask to be 7 people or ask to sit at the bar, and it's just an absolute no. If you want to be 7 people, you have to be 2 tables. And so, really just adhering to our state, guidelines. I mean, that's absolutely mandatory. We implemented an extra 5 days of emergency sick leave so that if not only anyone was feeling ill, but any family members were feeling ill or tested positive, that they would get paid for those days. I mean, I think that some legislators don't understand that, if some of our restaurant colleagues are not working and not getting paid, their family doesn't eat or they can't pay their rent. And so, to give people that, that comfort level that if there's a problem, and then again, just following all of the, the safety protocols, masks and gloves and making sure that the tables are actually socially distant. I'm sure you've seen many outdoor dining where if you took a tape measure out, there's no way those tables are 6 feet apart. But really adhering absolutely rigidly to the guidelines is all we can do to protect ourselves. But I have to imagine that a lot of restaurateurs who are closing their doors forever now are just thinking of this, added headache. Every day that I go into my restaurant or ask any of my team to go in, and I have guests coming in, we're exposed. We're potentially exposed. So it's a really tough decision to keep your doors open. But, you know, I, like many of my colleagues, have worked our whole lives to build these businesses. And so, you know, we don't want to see the doors shut, and we don't want to, we feel a real responsibility to the people that work on our teams, as I'm sure you do as well.
And, you know, it's, yeah, go ahead, Carl.
Just, I think the other thing to answer Jason's question is, for me, it's always, I'm old enough now that I know that you follow the money. And, you know, we're all wondering, why aren't there more lawsuits? Well, the courts are still closed. Like, I mean.
Oh, you're right.
The court,
you're right. That's not an insignificant point. They are closed.
Yeah. And so there'd be a lot more. But these lawyers, you know, they run on this thing called money. And I think it's a really interesting phenomena that we're not seeing more issues, because theoretically there should be massive numbers of lawsuits for defaulted businesses, loans, people, you know, getting sick, but all the money. It's kind of that simple in my way of thinking.
Good point.
Wow. Well, you know, I mean, it's such a culture too. It's such an ingrained part of our lives now, you know. But like I said, you know, when I went to eat this weekend, you know, every other booth was empty. So they gave you that social distancing and stuff like that. And I think for me personally, I appreciated, although it is weird walking through a casino and every other machine's broken, you know, or it feels like every other machine's broken when it's turned off. You're almost like you want to go up and you're looking for a tech to get this thing working again. But that's what we have to do to get through these challenging times, you know. You know, Jason, that was a really good question. You know, it's just so integral and important about going open. I just got a text while we were talking from Jesse saying that de Blasio just announced plans to reopen indoor dining in New York City. Right. So, but you know, look at what he had to do to get there. Look how long New York City and along New York and all the rules and the grief that he got, and everyone. I mean, he's just every day he's been doing these press conferences. You've seen him, Elizabeth, right? He sits at that table every day and he takes questions, and like a real New Yorker, man, he just sits there and he takes it and he gives it. And you know, excuse me, I was thinking about Como. I meant Como, not de Blasio. But you know, the fact that it was a really hard a path to get there. And that seems like a lot of people, you know, we all just were trying to get back to normal, you know. And when I do go to the casino, that's what it feels like. There's this normality that it brings that we're just really missing in our everyday lives. And when you go to the casino, when you go to the restaurant, it reminds you of the life that seems to be taken away. You know, our routines are taken out, you know. So the question is, you know, what, now that we've talked about the issue and we've talked about how bad it is, I think it's important that we talk about solutions. You know, I think it's very important. Like I said, I feel that the tribal casinos and the casinos that are able to open and do indoor dining, they are starting to show a pathway. But the thing is that, you know, they usually have a lot, well, not everyone, but, you know, they have a lot more space to do business as opposed to the mom and pop diner. You know, I go to these places when I go to London, there's like this little breakfast place that I love. It has like table for like 3 people, you know what I mean? You just go in, you get English breakfast, and, you know, that kind of place isn't going to be able to social distance, you know? So my question is, what are the solutions now? You know, you know, actually, you know what? I had an interesting question before you go to my question. It says, once vaccines are released, do you foresee some type of proof of vaccination being used in order to allow guests to eat indoors?
It's going to vary by jurisdiction, because again, everybody's enforcing differently. So there might be a different rule in one part of the state of California from another. In Nevada and New York and Minnesota, the cities within those places are going to have different interpretations. I really wonder, Victor, what does a post-COVID world look like? Because again, 20-30% of us are going to refuse the vaccine. I'm taking the vaccine, but what about those who don't? And, you know, are you going to have an obligation to say, like, show me your proof? like, where does that line go? And I think as a guest, I can't imagine having to give proof of being vaccinated. It's kind of hard to me imagine because it just
Sounds
feels
very
But,
Big Brother.
very
but
un-American.
I can imagine doing this in a high roller area. You know what I mean? Or creating something like that says, maybe not a high roller area. Don't let those guys gamble naked. But I think a place, you know what I mean, where the casinos right now are saying, listen, you can't come in if you have a bandana. You can't come in if you have one of those valves on your things. Which is a little more stringent than others. And one of the things that has been noticeable, and Carl, you bring up a really good point, which is the politicizing this very important health and safety issue. But I think the casinos are one of those places that can say whether they will say, but which I think they're getting a little more stricter, because in tribal gaming, we are the demographic that's being hurt by this pandemic. Our elders are with health issues and stuff like that. So for us, it's extra important that we create spaces for our people to go. And so that's kind of really at the kind of root the root of the more stringent requirements for Indian country. But I wonder, if that's even possible. I think, Carl, you talk about a very important point, which is, it is very big brotherish and it is kind of scarce. But I think as an industry, that is something we should look at. And, Elizabeth, I think maybe in Vegas it might even help,
Victor, in Las Vegas, so many of us restaurateurs and casino executives have to be mask police. I mean, if you're wearing your mask under your nose, the number of times that you see people with the mask on their ear, it's like, it has to be on your face. And so, I think it's a very hard thing to do. We'll see what happens with the vaccine, but these are tough questions, and it's definitely a tough road ahead. All I want to do is be able to greet our guests with a smile. It's amazing, what a difference it is, when you can't see people's faces and you're trying to give a guest experience. And so, in a fine dining steakhouse at a tribal casino, when you have, a very hefty check average and you can barely understand through the muffled voice, or can you imagine a sommelier trying to, describe the wine, especially if there's background music or anything else, it's made it very, very difficult to provide the service levels that, that we. So, having to be mask police or vaccine police just seems very over.
I think it's going to vary. I think, one of the things I witnessed in 30 years of watching Indian country operate some casino businesses very well is how entrepreneurial different tribes have been. And, somebody might have a really high level of safety protocol and say, show me your papers, show me your vaccination. And if that works for that tribe, they're going to get more business. If it's too onerous, they're going to go down the street. And it'll probably be, it's going to be kind of a shootout on, let's try this. Let's give the guests what they want. And some guests are going to be really risk averse and they might navigate towards that place. Other guests are like, I don't care. I might go to this place because it's less restrictive. So I think the market will sort out a lot of these issues, not the government.
Well, I agree, but and just like the tribes and non-smoking, the tribes have done this willingly, and they've created, the idea was behind it. Obviously, if you smoke, you gamble and stuff like that. But now they're finding, people are still going to come, and it's if you don't have smoking. And when my tribe went non-smoking, and then San Manuel went non-smoking, who is our local competition and stuff like that, we both went for the same reason, is to create a safer environment, not because the other person was doing it. And they ended up, I think, being beneficial to everyone. And I think a lot of us are hoping that we'll follow through with this. But it seems to me that technology seems to be an answer for a lot of problems. Not every problem, but to a lot of them. Let me and kind of going back. Elizabeth, when you talked about Wynn Buffet, that was really interesting because I think a lot of us had a lot of hope for that. You know what I mean? And if anyone's going to do it right, it's going to be those guys. And by the way, we might have said that we used to work with Wynn. That's how you made your name, Elizabeth.
Yep.
And,
Many years.
Yeah, and actually, when I first heard your name was through your cousin Melissa, and who's a very, very dear friend of mine, as you probably know, as you do know.
Yes.
But how do you see technology helping this, Elizabeth? And Carl, the question goes to both of you. How can technology help us get through this pandemic?
I mean, look, that's what they're doing in Hong Kong is very draconian levels of contract tracing. So when you come into a restaurant, you give your ID. You're being tracked on your phone. Are Americans going to go for that? I think that these are, very existential questions as to what this new normal is going to look like. And I think that, there are already contract tracing apps that you can voluntarily put yourself on, to see if anyone's been sick, but they're going to need, numbers. They're going to need volumes of people to be subscribing. So I think it's difficult. I don't know, Carl, what your perspective?
Yeah, that's a really difficult question to answer. I think the market will drive some of this. You're seeing in hotels these days, people putting in these room service robots as an example. The hotel general managers I speak with about this, those who have them, say that they actually are making a little bit of money now because of their novelty value, not because people feel safer. It's just like, hey, I want to have a robot deliver my dinner and a bottle of wine, and that's cool. And is that really technology, or is that just a new tool? I think some things that are sacrosanct going forward is health and safety, whether that's delivered through technology or through protocols, as Elizabeth discussed earlier. I mean, successful restaurateurs today have their protocols down tight. And it really doesn't matter what your technological environment is. Outdoor is better than indoor because you don't have to worry about ventilation. So I don't know that technology is going to be the white knight here. I think this is more of a societal question mark that we have to wrestle with as a people. And I think there's a lot more unanswered questions because we just don't know what a post-COVID, post-vaccine era is going to look like. When some of us are vaccinated, some of us aren't. Some regulations are loosened, some are still tight. Some guests are still paranoid. Others don't care. So I think there's a lot of unanswered questions, and I don't think that technology will be a magic solution for this one.
Well, you're right. Technology will not solve all the problems. I think people, we know tribal gaming was created to help tribes to generate revenue, to help tribal governments. And it's also created to generate jobs and to create, economies within on the reservations and stuff like that. And so, it really defeats the purpose by putting in more vending machines and putting in more and creating, if you can go to the smallest casino, and yet there's going to be a place to eat, there's going to be a place to socialize. It's so very important for the tribes that what we've created here is very important to our bottom line. So for us, we are going to be looking for whatever solutions that we have out there, and I think you can rest assured that the tribes will be on the cutting edge of this. And as you know, they're very entrepreneurial, and they want to find these solutions. And we are looking just like everyone else to figure out how to make our places safer, how to keep them open, and more importantly, that's why we're talking about restaurants, is how to keep our businesses open. So, Jason, what have I missed, man? What do we miss here, brother?
I think we hit it. I had one sort of historical question for Carl, trying to find some optimism in this.
I know. I promised we wouldn't be like all doom and gloom, and
But Carl, just looking back in history, has there been times where the restaurant industry just took huge hits, whether it was the Great Recession, whether it was, in the 70s, high inflation, something like that. How did the restaurant industry respond to a previous shock to the system, if you will? I'm just not attuned enough with your industry to know when they had these shocks before.
Sure, great question. So there's I think there's a conceptual thing I'd throw out and then I'll give you the answer, Jason. It's restaurants aren't a leading economic indicator. They follow the economy. So if the economy is doing great, restaurants do better. Every once in a while there's a new restaurant concept or whatever, and they get a better share of that market. But the reality is restaurants grow when the economy grows. So you had things like 9/11, which was an economic and a mental health shock. Everybody stopped traveling. Well, anybody on an expense account stopped traveling. Guess what happened to restaurants that depended on that business dinner? They were hurt real bad, really bad. And go back to the Great Recession 10 years ago, when the economy collapsed, things stopped again. Meetings stopped, business travel stopped, and the restaurants that were in that space got compressed. And I think is unique about today is we have a health scare and an economic contraction unlike any that any of us who are alive have really ever experienced. And there are some green shoots of hope with people opening up restaurants and other businesses and that are actually flourishing in the real business model. But there have been plenty of times in history when it feels like, oh my God, it's all over. And then 2 years later, it comes back. And
but it's
I think
this extended period, Carl, wouldn't you say that? I mean, in
absolutely.
this unknown, and we shut down for 3 months because we were supposed to get beyond this, and now we're 6 months later, and there's no answers. So.
Well, exactly. We have government intervention that is inconsistent on top of economic contraction. So the poor restaurateur is going, oh my God, like I'm having to deal with both. I think this is the first time in history that we've had to deal with both crazy hodgepodge of regulations. I mean, listen to what Victor just said. Oh gosh, somebody's now going to allow a restaurant in New York City to be open this winter. Isn't that great? It's like, that's a political decision. That has nothing to do with the health and safety or the economics. It was just a politician saying, I grant you this power. And that's what's unique about this is the economic contraction and the government regulation being so inconsistent.
One of my favorite restaurants is this little Italian place in New York, and it's got brick walls and the owner is like Italian where you can't even understand. It takes like 4 of you to like decipher this guy's thing, and it's got the brick walls and it's loud and it's so New York, you know what I mean? And the food's phenomenal. And, I don't want these to go in, and I know they won't. And I think that's the important thing that everyone should know is that, listen, we will get through this. And, as the tribes, we understand hard times better than anyone. And we know that we will get through this. And, I think we covered a really interesting issue. I want to thank you both. Really, honestly, thank you so much. And, it wasn't really our intent to be doom and gloom. It's just we're really trying to understand where this industry is going, what's happening. And more importantly, we want the tribes to understand that, we'll get through this. We'll get through this together. We're sharing information. We're sharing strategies. And Elizabeth, as you know, as someone who goes around and, you have your ear to the ground, we are going to do whatever we can to survive. And for the gaming industry, it's just so important. Dining is just as important as gambling, creating that experience. And now I honestly feel that, we provide a service of you walk into the casino and it feels, I don't know if it's good or bad, but it feels normal. It feels like, okay, this is what life was. And we're under so much restrictions and things you can't do, and masks and stuff like that, the casinos do provide that feeling of normality, which I think is still very important. So unless you have any more questions, Jason, I think we're done. Listen, Elizabeth, thank you so much. We really appreciate you. Carl, thank you so much. We appreciate you, appreciate your program. And Dr. Kate Spildy, we know you guys are doing great work over there. Hopefully sometime let's talk about that on the webcast also. We would like to remind everyone we'll be back next week with our friends Jeff Wang and Richard Schutz, and actually Kate Spildy's going to be on next week too. And actually, we're going to be talking about Las Vegas and what's happened there in the last 6 months and the lessons learned and stuff like that. So and I think that will be my last doom and gloom session for a while. So again, thank you everyone. Thank you all the viewers out there, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.